freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same. And if you and I don't do this, then you and I may well spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it once was like in America when men were free.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode number 530 of Gun Freedom Radio, where we engage, we educate, and we inform. We are brought to you by Pot of Gold Auctions, that's POGauctions.com, where you set the price on guns, coins, ammo, jewelry, accessories, antiques, collectibles, cars, boats, you name it. That's POGauctions.com. I am your host today, Cheryl Todd. Dan, the other guy, is off sick today, so I will be ruddering the ship today. And we are excited to introduce you to our guest today, Matt Osborne. So Matt is a 12-year CIA and State Department veteran with extensive experience in security, threat awareness, public safety, and combating human trafficking. It's wild to me that we are talking about human trafficking in the year 2026, but here we are. So today, as a certified USCCA instructor, Matt equips individuals and families with practical skills to recognize potential threats, make good decisions under pressure, and take greater responsibility for their personal safety. Welcome to the show, Matt.
Thank you, Cheryl. So great to be with you.
I am so excited about this because, situational awareness is such a key thing. And I've even titled this episode as Safety Starts With You. And so let's just kind of launch from there. People always say that knowing your surroundings and being aware of what's going on around you really is the starting point. But then when we're training, so often we're just out on the range and we're just shooting at a static target and making sure that, that goes smoothly.
Right.
Is that a mistake in the order of things, or what would you say about that?
Well, as much as I love firearms and going to the range, I'm sure you do as well, it all comes down to avoiding if at all cost. When I was with the CIA, some of the best training I had was a class called Avoid, Evade, Counter. Of those three words, what's the most important, right? And they drilled into our heads that whether we were about to deploy to Iraq or Afghanistan or to the dangerous countries I served in, Mexico, Venezuela, that using your weapon, countering, that was the last resort. So what we teach at the USCCA is very close to what is taught at the CIA: conflict avoidance, de-escalation. We teach something called the Cooper color codes that your audience may be aware of, where white is kind of oblivious, not paying attention. Yellow is the code we want people in when they're out enjoying their day-to-day life, living their life. That is what you need to have, the same amount of situational awareness as we have when we are defensive driving. Cheryl, I think you would agree. We all know when we drive, we need to be aware. So why aren't we also focused on being equally aware when we are at the mall, at the movie theater, out and about at the grocery store? So then to your question about the range, I am a really good shot when I am calm and breathing and no one's shooting back at me and I can focus on that target. How do you mimic that adrenaline? Well, the agency and also the USCCA, we teach methods such as, doing 50 push-ups and then trying to get and see how your aim is at that point, or imagining in a scenario that it's a shoot, don't shoot. It's all these different exercises that first and foremost should train the mind. That's our most important weapon to keep ourselves safe. Our mind, then our senses. Then if we can't avoid, because things happen as we know, then we need to evade. So the CIA would always teach us to play the what if game. So imagine our daily life. You're parked your car in a grocery store outside of a Walmart. What if that van comes a little close to me and parks next to me? Okay, probably nothing, but let me pay attention to that. There's someone who gives me the creeps, gives me the willies, my senses go off. Don't just ignore that. Our bodies are trained to pick up on things that don't seem right, but our minds are unfortunately trained to bias to normalcy. Oh, that creepy guy in the trench coat. Yes, that's a stereotype. You know what I mean? He's giving me the creeps, but what's my mind saying? It's nothing. Don't worry about it. You're overreacting.
Mm,
That is when you get into trouble. So
mhm.
I loved your question and the premise of your question. So for your audience, as much as we want to go and put rounds down range, let's think about we're not going to get into a situation in our daily lives or elsewhere where we can't know how to get out of.
Yeah.
Avoid, evade, and then if you have to, counter.
That was so well said. And what I kept thinking about as you're talking is because you were talking about driving, and I always think in terms of giving myself some margin, right? I want some margin for my front bumper, my rear bumper, and also on the sides. I don't want to be all sandwiched in if I can at all help it. And I tend to think that way in parking lots as well, right? Like, do I have to necessarily park next to a van with a big sliding door on my
Right.
driver's side? Maybe I can find some place that has a little margin around it. And, when I am in a public place to be more aware of the space around me. And I
Correct.
think I do that more naturally than I do that thing like, well, do I know where the exits are? So there's always room for improvement, right?
There really is. And a couple things you just said that I wanted to come back to. Defensive driving, when we're out and about driving, is a threat likely, probable, or possible? I'd say it's
Mm.
possible. Now, I live in Dallas, Texas, the crazy road. Someone could say, no, no, it's probable, but you know what I mean. It's possible.
Yes.
The same as when we're out in our daily lives. Is a threat likely? Probably not. Probably no, but possible. So it's
Mm.
that type of awareness. But then, if that van you just mentioned, you're parked next to, probably not an issue, but what if all of a sudden something happens? They try to block you. Someone gets out of their car and breaches what we call at the USCCA your protective bubble. Each of us have a
Mm.
different protective bubble. There's no right or wrong answer. The right answer, I would say the right answer is what is, gets you protected. Then, if you really start to feel a threat is no longer possible, it's probable, you then need to go into code orange. Another
Mm.
driving analogy. Now, I'm not just defensive driving that I can do all day. Think about the last time you drove in hail, wind,
Mm.
sleet, snow. You're focused. Your vision is on the threat. Your knuckles are white. Your heart's beating. That is what the state of your body and the physics are in when you're in code orange. Then, if you have to fight, you have to flight, we say you go to code red. Why am I spending time talking about the colors, the Cooper color codes? It is almost impossible for a body in code white, a mind not paying attention, whether you're on your cell phone, whether you're not paying attention, you're just oblivious. It's almost impossible for someone to go from code white to immediately code red, fight or
Mm.
flight. You will do as we joke, and this is a PG audience, so I'm not saying the other F word is freeze. And if you don't fight, you flight, and you'll
Mm.
freeze. So that's why we're
Mm.
talking about these things. It's not
Mhm.
to freak anyone out. I don't want anyone contacting you, you're wonderful, Danny, and saying that USCCA guy freaked me out. I'm not going to go live my life. I'm not going to leave my house. No, I'm not saying that. But in knowledge is empowerment. And I'll end with this one thing we teach at the USCCA. Attention buys you time, time
Mm.
buys you options. So if
Mm.
you're paying attention, that will buy you time to then have options to get away, if at all possible, or if not, to engage in a legal, lawful manner to protect yourself, your family, or your loved ones.
Wow, that's so important. And, that idea that, time is everything. It really
It is.
comes down to seconds when you are making those kinds of decisions. And I have experienced myself, like, oh, talking myself down. Oh, don't overreact to this person's
Yep.
body language or so on and so forth. my husband and I had a retail shop for about 20 years up until a few years ago. And, you're reading people all day long as they walk in the door in any kind of a retail setting, but particularly a gun store. And then we had COVID, where they were encouraging people to come in with masks on their face and gloves on their hands. And it was like we were on high alert all the time. And thank God we never had an incident.
Yeah.
But it's that constant balance between wanting to overreact and trying to calm yourself down to find that middle space, that orange, I guess, is what I would be maybe talking about. But
And one thing I'll add is if anyone think you're listening right now to your show and to our conversation will say, I don't want to feel silly. If I'm walking to my car and I'm committed and there's a creepy guy next to the car or a creepy car, I'm going to take a chance because I would feel silly or stupid turning around, acting like I forgot a loaf of bread in the grocery store, going back in. I say if that's the worst thing that will happen is if you may feel silly, do it because you successfully avoid or survive. You successfully survive 100% of the potentially dangerous situations you avoid. Do everything you can. If your spidey senses are going off, do not let your mind talk you out of it.
I love that. That is so important. One of the things I wanted to chat with you about today, because of your extensive experience, is that we hear a lot about this Supreme Court decision and that Supreme Court decision that has to do with our firearms laws. And we're hearing about more and more of them, which I think is a positive. I hate that the Supreme Court is deciding so many things for us. We should be deciding them earlier, when we're hiring people with our votes and we're being involved down at our capitals, engaging in different laws that are being passed and that sort of thing. But we do have the Supreme Court that's weighed in on several things. If I'm the average mom and pop and I'm hearing all these different things, can you maybe encapsulate, just like you did with the other topic we were talking about, a little bit about how do these different things impact me on a personal level and the average mom and pop out there listening that doesn't have time to delve into every single Supreme Court case and precedent law and that sort of thing?
I think you said it just a minute ago that unfortunately it's become so polarized. Why are firearms laws and restrictions relaxed more in red states than blue states? When the Second Amendment is federal, it's for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
For responsible gun owners, I think you should be optimistic. You should be pleased, even excited. I know maybe that's not the right word, but that finally the Supreme Court is not expanding the Second Amendment, it's
Yes.
enforcing it. It's
Thank you.
taking it seriously. And I promise I'm not taking your audience on a history lesson right now, but I wanted to highlight two cases. And imagine in the last century, for decades, the Second Amendment rights were being debated. They were being restricted in some states, debated, overturned, different court cases. But in 2008, the case DC versus Heller, that was really the first kind of landmark decision that allowed the keep, as you know, keep and bear arms in the Second Amendment. That was no, you are allowed, Americans, law-abiding Americans are allowed to keep arms under your Second Amendment rights without having to prove some need for self-defense. Then fast forward to 2022 with the Bruen decision, New York State Pistol and Rifle Association versus Bruen. That addressed the bear arms part of the Second Amendment. So now we have justices saying the Second Amendment means what it says what it means. You have a right to keep and bear arms. Now we'll come a little more modern to this most recent Supreme Court session. In two major decisions, Walford versus Lopez and United States versus Hamani, the court showed that these restrictions that have been put up, certainly in Walford and Hawaii, and I won't go into too many details, but in Hawaii, you couldn't go to common private places that were open to the public, gas stations, restaurants, malls, movie theaters, unless there was an actual sign that said guns welcome. Cheryl, how likely is that, right? Certainly in a blue state. So
Not likely.
imagine you are a lawful permit holder, but you don't know where you can go. Supreme Court struck that down. There will be a number of states now, mostly blue states, that have put up these regulations to try and restrict the rights of lawful and law-abiding gun owners that will now be challenged in future court sessions, including this upcoming one. So I'll wrap up this part, and then if you have additional questions, but those who are interested, as you said, average mom and pop, you're going about your daily life. You're the ones who make this country work. Just know that in this next session, the court will likely take up 2 bans against so-called assault weapons, right? We know what these are, semi-automatic rifles. Bans in Connecticut and Cook County, Illinois. Think Chicago. And also a couple of states that have restricted magazine limits, capacity limits. This, I think, will be more landmark decisions that will continue to relax restrictions to actually give Americans their Second Amendment rights. But as we say at the USCCA, we should be pleased with the way things are going, but we cannot go to sleep. Because the other side, and Cheryl, I've seen so many of your videos, your powerful speeches and talks, including on Capitol Hill not too long ago. You've said, we cannot go to sleep. The other side won't go to sleep. They are not going to give up this fight. We cannot relax either.
Well, I appreciate that so much. And I don't think we can say that loud enough and
Yes.
often enough. And so to tie a couple of things together from what you just said, Bruin,
Mhm.
well, first of all, the Supreme Court, as you said, they're not expanding our rights, but the side that wants to take our rights, that's the way they're packaging it to the average citizen. Like,
Absolutely.
that we're trying to create new laws and make new laws. No, we're just trying to move the needle back where our founders placed it in the first place. And then with Bruin, it was the tradition and the language at the
Yep.
time that our Bill of Rights was ratified, and any laws that have been piled on since then basically don't measure up, and so should therefore be nullified.
Right.
And then the idea of the national right to carry. One of the things that I have loved so much about the USCCA is I travel a lot. I go speaking different places. I do have a concealed carry license with Arizona, which gives me reciprocity with some states and
Yes.
not others, and
Correct.
certain restrictions, even though maybe I can, in certain states. And the USCCA, and I don't think this is even part of the paid membership. I think this is something you offer to everyone, is a
Correct.
map online that tells me very clearly where I can and can't carry. So thank you to the USCCA for that. But why is this such a hurdle to get over? Because the whole nation used to be right, have national reciprocity. There didn't used to be these little enclaves.
Yes.
So what should conceal carriers like myself understand about this patchwork of laws that sometimes is even city to city, much less state to state?
The word you use, patchwork, is absolutely what it is. Imagine a quilt. The United States is out in a quilt, and some states you're allowed to carry. Maybe it's the red, we'll say. Others, the blue, you're not allowed to. But how can anyone know without really studying these things? Thank you for putting in the plug, both at uscca.com and our brand new USCCA app for members and non-members alike. It is such a handy tool. I will tell you, tomorrow, my wife and I are leaving to drive to Tennessee, Knoxville, Tennessee, to take my daughter back for her senior year of college. I have had to look and make sure, okay, I'm in Texas. As long as I go through Arkansas, okay, Tennessee, all right, I think I'm okay. What about Oklahoma? Well, then we're going to go visit some family in the Midwest, Ohio, Indiana. Okay, I think we're okay. Oh my gosh, we were going to actually come back. We were going to go through Illinois, a little part of the highway in Illinois. If I wasn't paying attention, I could have unknowingly and unwittingly broken a state law, been in violation. This is not fair to Americans. It is not fair to legally and lawful gun owning Americans. We at the USCCA, we took notice of President Trump a couple of months ago and asked about national reciprocal concealed carry legislation. He said, yes, that's something we're working on. Well, I love the president for so many policies that he's done, but I want to make sure he follows through on this one. So, Mr. President, with all due respect, please don't just work on it, consider it, do it. Please move forward on this. This is something that, regardless of where you stand on the issue, I hope everyone agrees we need clarity of laws. Some
Hmm.
states having constitutional carry, other states having some of the most tight restrictions. This just doesn't work. And too many people risk running afoul of the law through no fault of their own, other than, understandably, they didn't spend hours studying this patchwork of laws, as you so aptly called it a moment ago.
It is so important. And again, it's just putting the line back where it used to be when
Correct.
the nation was developed. Tools of self-protection, tools of hunting, those were in every single home. And it was no different than the hammer or any other tool that people used to improve their lives.
Right.
And somehow it has become this, as you said, divisive topic, this political topic, and we really need to restore what has been lost. And, myself, I'm a woman, I'm a married woman, but a lot of times when I travel, I am by myself.
Mhm.
And I value the ability to carry my tool of choice that I am trained with
Right.
where I go. And when I am disarmed, when that piece of my wardrobe has to be left at home, I don't know who that can possibly serve. Who can that possibly be keeping safe? No one.
Correct. And I will say too that again, it's cliche, but we believe that oftentimes the only person who can stop a bad man, a bad person with a gun, is a good person with a gun. How about a couple of weeks ago? I think maybe August 1st it was, Twin Falls, Idaho, tragic shooting in an In-N-Out burger restaurant. And yet law enforcement says, but not for the brave action of two law-abiding citizens. One, an off-duty state trooper. Another, someone who got his concealed carry license after a mass shooting in that state years earlier.
Mm.
Took the time to learn training that we just talked about a minute ago and that the USCCA offers. De-escalation, conflict avoidance. But what do you do when the stuff hits the fan? We'll keep it
Mhm.
family friendly. When the stuff hits the fan, how are you going to rise to the occasion? At the CIA, they taught you won't rise to the occasion. You will sink to the level of your training. So if you're trained up, you won't sink very, very far. Anyone who would say would be against guns, right? I understand there are all sorts of arguments, and I love the way you kind of cut through the noise and say, nope, let's just get to the basics. I think you would want someone to be trained to make sure they have the practice, to make sure they're following the laws. This is not a shootout at the OK Corral. These are men and women who know that, and I love it over your right shoulder. I am my own first responder. As
Mhm.
our founder, Tim Schmidt, says, if it's to be, it's got to be me. Meaning, if it happens, you have to be your own first line of defense. And that's what we teach. And that's what we hope that everyone within the sound of my voice will work in concentric circles. Make sure you are as trained and knowledgeable as possible, then your family, then your coworkers, your community. And we're going to go out this way until nationally, whether people choose to carry a firearm or not, we want them to be safe. The world is going down the drain. No matter what side of the political aisle you're on, I think you can understand, can agree. Our world is going down the drain. Bad things happen to good people, but you need to be able to do all you can to avoid danger, save lives, and keep your loved ones safe.
Well, I feel, a personal responsibility to those things. And that is who I'm trying to reach is other people who, yes, I feel that responsibility. And now what, right?
Yes.
It's the now what that I think a lot of times people divide. We all want to protect what we love. We all want to be safe. But there's a whole group of people out there that think the only way to be safe is without guns. Like if they could
Right.
wave a magic wand and guns just disappear, then we will all join hands, sing kumbaya and love each other.
Right.
Um, and then I believe I'm a realist. And I say that having those tools at my ready is actually what helps keep people safe. And again, to use maybe an overused phrase, but an armed society tends to be a polite society. And
Correct.
here in Arizona, where we have constitutional carry, where we don't need any permission slip from anyone to carry, whether we want to carry outside the waistband and open, or, somehow concealed in a off-body purse, or somehow strapped to our body.
Right.
I believe, and I think that we can see examples of, when you are in an area like that, bad guys, predators, they think an extra blip before they will
Absolutely.
act. But if we're
Absolutely.
in these so-called gun-free zones, which is absolutely a misnomer,
Do not work.
because,
That's right.
right, that is where the predators go because they believe that they're going to have much less resistance. And I know we've touched on a lot of this, but there are things beyond just the tool, the gun,
Hmm.
for self-defense. I don't want to bring a knife to a gunfight.
Right.
So, I generally try to go places that I can have my tool of choice. But the reality is, we can't take a gun with us everywhere we go, like
Hmm.
on an airplane, So at a certain point in an airport, we automatically become disarmed. When I go to Washington, D.C. to meet with our legislators on Capitol Hill, there's every building there basically.
Right.
I'm disarmed. What are some of the other things that we need in our toolbox, whether it's a physical tool or whether it's like a metaphorical toolbox? What do we need to help protect ourselves and our families?
And it really goes back to how you and I started this today, is talking about situational awareness. And I love the title that talking about for this episode. And it really comes down to keeping your wits about you, having your antenna up. You know where you should go and where you shouldn't. You know what time you should go there and what time you shouldn't. Do we go to a gas station? Absolutely. Do you go at midnight or 1 a.m.? Right? The CIA
Yes.
would always teach a half a tank of gas is an empty tank of gas, meaning when it gets down to half, you're filling it up because you need to be able to control when you go to the gas station and when you don't. You also need to know the situations, keep informed, especially if you travel, right? Whether you have your firearm with you or not, know what's going on. Don't be afraid to change your plans if something's happening. One of the things that we kind of joke about, and I think you would agree, even being a concealed carry holder, don't ever go anywhere with your gun that you wouldn't go without your gun, right? If it's dangerous enough where you wouldn't go with a firearm, then maybe you need to rethink those things. Also, I want to invite people to, again, have a plan, talk to your family. You, parents and grandparents, you know your kids and grandkids better than anyone. You know, if sometimes, for instance, I have two daughters growing up, one could be absolutely scared, meaning that the way I would talk to them, there are bad people out there and they'll do this too, and you've got to be careful in this. And then the other one was, so, honey, there are some people who sometimes do bad things. You make decisions, so you'll know how to tailor it. But what you want everyone to know is what to do if something happens, who to call, who to contact. But before any of that, it's if there's a doubt, there is no doubt. If something feels wrong, you get out of there. And I will use this analogy again of this shooting at the In-N-Out Burger in Idaho. Yes, there were some cell phone videos that helped law enforcement in their investigation. But when I watch those videos, to me, there were a lot of cell phone videos of people who should have been getting the heck out of Dodge and not sitting there. So whether you're at Lollapalooza or a World Cup game or a concert or a mall, if things start happening, don't just sit there and whip out your phone and video. You get yourself out. So I don't know, Cheryl, if that answers your question, but I want people to know that just a little bit of awareness, that is empowering. And just being in that code yellow, you will be able to go from yellow, that guy look weird, to orange, he's coming after me, to red, I've got to fight flight. It really is that possible. And I want everyone to know that they can do it. And if something happens, and as a CI used to say, you're on the X, the attack is coming, fight like heck. Give everything to survive, to get out of there. And I pray it never happens to anyone in your audience, but we know the chances are not high, but they're not zero.
Exactly. And one of the pieces of that question I was kind of curious about is, how do you feel about the less than lethal, the non-lethal options that are out there? Do you feel a little like I do, that, I don't want to bring a Byrna to a gunfight. I don't want to bring pepper spray to a gunfight or a knife to a gunfight. I would rather just not have the gunfight, obviously, right? And get the heck out of Dodge, as you said. But is there a place for those other tools that and do you just buy them and then you have them, or do you train with them as well?
Gosh, a lot of great questions, a lot of great points. So first and foremost, each of you, you know your, how do I call it, your threshold for personal security, meaning some of you are great, you get your concealed carry, your license, you're ready, you train, you've got a variety of different weapons, handguns, rifles, whatever it is. Perfect. Others, I completely understand. No, I don't think I could ever carry a gun. So maybe I'm going to do pepper spray. Maybe I'll do a baton. Maybe I'll do one of these burner guns or others. Okay, but make sure you train and train and train on that and make sure that muscle memory is automatic. Just as we're practicing pulling from an inside the waistband holster, presenting to the target over and over again. I have my CERT pistol. My wife makes all sorts of fun of me. I'm watching a game on Sunday and I'm real quick, whipping up the garment, getting it out, but that's what's a muscle memory. I have known people who, unfortunately, when they tell their stories, they got attacked and they had pepper spray in their purse. Cheryl, do you think ever once they figured out, practice how to, unzip the purse, get in, find it amongst everything that's in the purse, figure out how to where's the button, how to turn it the right way? There's just no time for that when the stuff hits the fan, when the adrenaline goes. So you mentioned at the very end of your question is, do you just buy it or do you train with it? I would say first and foremost, don't go into a false sense of security that having the non-lethal will help you truly in a gunfight, because it won't. But if you do purchase anything non-lethal, and we have great trainings on our website about non-lethal, practice, practice, practice so that the muscle memory is as automatic as you would need it to be if it were a handgun.
I think that's so important, and it's the thing that falls off people's schedule and their priority list, I think, way too quickly
Correct.
when life gets busy and stays busy. So I appreciate you kind of hammering that home. Last question, similar to the ones that we've been talking about, but the title the topic of today's episode is Safety Starts With You.
Mhm.
Very rarely are we an island unto ourselves, right? We are generally with our family. We are generally with other people. So at home, particularly when I was younger, we were taught a lot about having a fire safety plan. Like,
Mhm.
where are you all going to meet? Are you in a two-story house? Do you have a ladder to get out the window? That sort of thing. I don't even know if we talk about that so much anymore.
Yeah.
But do you do you advocate that families should interact together on a safety plan when it comes to if a bad guy comes to the door or something of that nature, if there's a break-in in the middle of the night? Like, how much can you play the what if game as an entire family? I know probably you and I sit there on the sofa and do our what if games and
Right.
drift off to sleep doing our what if games. But how do you extend that to the rest of the family without getting the eye rolls and people think you're just paranoid?
So once again, I think it goes back to everyone in your audience knowing themselves, knowing their own families better than anyone. Some families I've worked with, and again, half joking here, but they're all in. They have the Mission Impossible theme song going on, and dun 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 dun. They're rolling around
I love
practicing
it.
different angles with the CERT gun. And then others, you're right. You mentioned, well, what if someone comes through the back door? Oh my gosh, what if someone comes through the back door? So you find the proper way to talk to your family about it, but you need to have this plan. And even if anyone's listening right now, if you don't want to even bring up with your family attacker, bad guy, burglar, why don't you say, what if, God forbid, there's an earthquake? What if there's a fire? What if something happens? Because it's the same type of things. How are we getting out? What is the minimum we're taking with us so we get ourselves out? Where is our rendezvous point? Are our cell phones charging? We want to make sure we're in communication. Does that make sense? And then those who are able to talk specifically about firearms, you can be more specific in that case. I think that just starting that conversation, phrase it as, hey, dear family, loved ones, daughters, sons, there is very little chance that anything could happen. However, If something does, I want you to feel that we have a plan. And that's how I would say that, you can move forward. And at the USCCA, we do have classes on home defense fundamentals, making sure your locks are what they need to be, your windows, how to make sure you've got your go bag, so to speak. You may and probably will never need these tips, tools, and strategies, but when the stuff hits the fan, you will be so happy that you have practiced this.
Gosh, it's so true. And I grew up three brothers and a single dad, and I was the closest thing to an adult in the household
Oh,
at
wow.
most times. Yeah. And we watched, Inspector Clouseau, the Pink Panther, and was it his butler that was trained to constantly try to jump out and surprise him and attack him and things like that? So that was one of our favorite little games that we would play when dad wasn't home and there really was no adult supervision. And but as funny as it was, I do think it kind of set a tone in our minds that we would think about, you know, around the corners, like what could happen, what are we
Right.
missing in our landscape, and that sort of thing. So I think we need to bring back Pink Panther and Inspector Clouseau for the next generation.
I love that. And I'll say one more thing on a more modern, and again, some may laugh and say that's overkill, but every once in a while, I will randomly set 3 or 4 alarms on my cell phone throughout the day. I'll forget about it. When that alarm goes off, that's a trigger for me to assume, okay, I'm under attack, I'm under a threat. How would I react? Maybe it goes off when I'm brushing my teeth. Maybe it goes off when I'm at Walmart. Maybe it goes off when I'm driving. But that is training your mind. That might be something someone would want to do in their families. Again, not to freak anyone out, but to say, okay, let's have a talk. The alarm just went off. You were upstairs. I was in the kitchen. You were in the backyard. How would we have reacted?
That is brilliant. I'm going to take that and I'm going to use that in my little what if games that I play on my own self. Well, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for all that you have done, that you are doing. I believe this conversation is going to cause people to think differently about their own households, their own landscape, the way that they even drive their car, right? To be sure that they've given themselves some margin around their safety. And I just would love for you to tell folks how they could continue to follow the work that you're doing, that USCCA is doing, whether it's online, in person. What are the opportunities?
Thank you, Cheryl. I'd invite those to visit uscca.com to learn about the education and training resources we provide, to talk about our self-defense liability insurance. You could do everything 100% correctly, use your firearm in a legal, lawful, justified manner. And at least initially, you're probably going to be arrested, go to jail. What happens if you have some ultra zealous prosecutor, DA, coming after you for nothing you did wrong? We provide that support. We have certified instructors all over the United States. I have a privilege of working with men, women, and youth, not to scare them, but to empower them. And I'm grateful to you, Cheryl. You've been a friend of the USCCA for years. We featured you as one of our amazing leaders a few years ago. Keep up the good work. And selfishly, I hope I can come back on sometime, because we could have talked about 50 other topics related to firearms and keeping our families safe. But so grateful to have been able to be with you today.
Absolutely. And thank you, and open invitation, because this is so important and you have such an extensive background. We will definitely have you back on again in the future. Thank you, Matt Osborne of the USCCA. Bye bye. My goodness, that was fun. And, going back into my little memory banks of playing Inspector Clouseau with my brothers growing up. And I haven't thought about that in a long time, but I really do think it kind of set the tone. And being home alone, I was, 12 and up, so my older brother was 14 and up when we were, with a single dad, and he was working all the time. We did need to be aware of our surroundings. We did need to make sure that we were securing the locks on all the windows and all the doors, and, not opening the door for strangers and those sorts of things. So I never felt like we were being paranoid, like we were doing overkill. I truly felt like we were just interacting with the reality that, danger strikes when it chooses. We don't get to say, you know what? I got 15 minutes free next Wednesday. I think that if I'm going to have an encounter with a predator in a parking lot, that's the best time to do it. And I'm going to be sure I have my firearm with me. I'm going to be sure I've got my head on a swivel that day. That isn't how it works. Danger gets to pick, and it definitely uses the element of surprise. And that is why we need to give surprise very few options for when it can happen, and we're prepared at all times. Well, thank you again to Matt Osborne for this incredible, uh, packed with lessons half hour that we've spent with him. The USCCA for all that they're doing to help train people and help keep families and the next generation safe, and also educated on why it's so important that we are involved in, even though they're not a group that reaches out and tries to necessarily impact legislation, it all works together. The more that we're aware of our training, the more that we're aware of the need for the certain tools, the more we're aware that, oh, this law is trying to be passed that is going to impede my family's ability to stay safe. I'm going to speak up about that. It's all interconnected. All right. Thank you again to Matt Osborne, to all of our amazing viewers and listeners all over the planet, wherever there is internet. We have people that are hungry for these conversations, hungry for the subject matter experts and all that they bring to the table. And when you take these conversations into your carpool, around your dinner table, into your little league parent groups, that is where change happens. That is where the magic happens, that people can start, chewing on these ideas, even if you disagree at first. That's okay. I invite our viewers all the time. If I've said something, if our guest has said something that you disagree with, that's amazing. I love that, because that means you are mentally active with the information, you're chewing on it. So that is beautiful. We want that. All right. We also want to thank the companies that come along beside us and help us do the work that we do. Pot of Gold, POG Auctions is our sponsor, but these other companies do help us financially when you help them. So, first of all, if you love to support American jobs on American soil and American made products, then you will love that I am giving you the invitation to join this invitation only shopping network, patriothousehold.com/GFR. That's where the magic happens. When you /GFR, every order that you place on there, we get some small percentage of to help with the work that we do. Well, what do you buy at patriothousehold.com/GFR? All the same things you would buy at the grocery store. Not the food necessarily, except they do have amazing beef products with their Riverbend Ranch, their steaks and hamburger. But the other things, your shampoo, your laundry soap, all those sorts of things. Stop spending your money with those big box stores that actively use your money against your values, and spend it with an organization and a company that actively supports them. patriothousehold.com/GFR. Now, keeping the same vein, we all walk around with these gadgets in our pockets, right? These cell phones, and we must have a cell service. Well, why would you give your money to these companies that use your money against you? Once again, use patriotmobile.com/GFR, of course. And every membership that they get, every subscribership that they get, they send a small portion to support the work that we do on Gun Freedom Radio. And finally, you have been forward thinking enough to have your tool of self-defense. You've also gotten your training. That is because as our guest, Matt Osborne, was saying, there is a chance that you would need to use it. If you do, as Matt said, the law will visit itself upon you, at least initially, and you will need an attorney on Retainer. And Attorneys on Retainer supports the work that we do. If you'll go to our homepage, gunfreedomradio.com, scroll on down, click the Attorneys on Retainer button. Every subscription, and full disclosure, every adult in our household are members, and it gives us huge peace of mind to know that we do have an attorney on retainer. And when you join up, we get a small piece of that as well. All right, we've got to get on out of here. So until next time, oh, you know what? I forgot to say that if you want to share this video, which I hope you do, with a friend, then you can find it at YouTube or Rumble or any place that you find your video streaming products. When you go to those platforms, please do all the things. Like it, share it, comment on it, subscribe, hit the notifications. All of those metrics hit the algorithm and tell those platforms that this is valuable information and these guests are voices that you value. And it gives us a hedge against the cancellation that happens out there. We were just in YouTube jail for 90 days for we don't even know why. And if we have a multitude of subscribers, people asking for notifications, it gives us protection against that through the algorithm. If you want to listen to the audio only version or while you're out driving around or on a long bike ride, then go to our homepage, gunfreedomradio.com, click the On Demand tab, and binge listen to your heart's content, darling. And if you want to see the photos and links and bios of Matt Osborne and all of our subject matter experts that we've ever had on, click the guest tab. It is an ever-growing database of amazing information. And when you spend time there, we don't hate that. All right, until next time, we are going to pray for our nation and pray for our leaders and people in leadership positions, even the ones that maybe we don't like so much or that we're frustrated with. Maybe especially those ones. All right. Until next time, be good to each other. Have a great week, and God bless.